Greetings and welcome, everybody, to another edition of The Great Exodus, or The Time of the End. How near are we to it on this Wednesday, January 15th, 2020? And again, I'm joined here with Michael in Germany and Jörg in Belgium, and they have graciously waited for me today since I was out at my mother's working on her garage. And we are dealing with the chapter 5 of the second portion of the book, The Coming of the Ancient of Days. And Michael, I want to welcome you, warm welcome to Michael on the other side of the ocean here.
Yeah, hi Brad. Nevertheless, I can swim. I'm glad you made it, and I'm very glad that you made it not only to the lecture but also, in good shape. So you sound very cool for a cool winter. So I'm about to take it from there. So I'm very glad that we can proceed in this, very precious little book. And so I hand it over to Jörg.
Yeah, hello, brothers. We have had some 45 degrees today outside.
Ooh.
So this is really a winter. 45 degrees Fahrenheit, 13 degrees centigrade. Really warm outside, but I love it. Rather 45 degrees plus than 0 degrees or even minus degrees.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm not such a big fan of winter, but I had lots of work in the weekend and the days after, and I didn't sleep as much as I needed to. That's why I'm a little bit tired today, and I didn't have any time to get into the book and do some kind of preparation reading. And actually, I love to do this with this book. Normally, I don't care to do preparational readings or not, but this book is sometimes very difficult even for me to understand. And therefore, sometimes it is hard when I do a very first read on this to not only do the right pronunciation of all words, but also the right pronunciation because of the text. And of course, to understand the text, because James Edgar Wylie did his utter best to really bring a very, very informative book together that also shines a different light on the understanding of the Book of Revelation. And the Book of Revelation is just a book that we started to read in our Bible study with Tom Fress every Saturday. And we are going to do that together with the reading of the book Hora Apocalypticae from E.B. Elliott. So that's going to be a very big task that we have in front of us. And also this book, The Great Exodus, is quite of a big task. And I can only advise anybody who follows our readings here, because this book is sometimes really hard to understand, not only follow our readings, but download the book for yourself. You have links on the description box, in the description box of the videos, but you can find the book for free. Download it and read it for yourself. And don't read it once, read it twice or 3 times even if you have the time. It will be worth your time, I can assure you that. But it is a book that doesn't reveal itself for the very first time, for the very first reading. Like the Book of Revelation also. That is also a little bit difficult to understand. Anyway, I don't want to take anything from the time that we have planned to do our reading today, so we are going to continue today on, I think it is the 26th reading, or the 29th even, I don't know, which is it? 28th reading.
Yeah.
28th
28th,
reading.
I think,
Yeah, the 28th reading. We're going to continue on page 283 in the PDF itself. Yeah, that's the PDF count. The book count is 282. It is the coming of the Ancient of Days. Yeah, that's what the chapter is called. And it starts here to speak about this hurricane. And with this hurricane, James Edgar Wylie is explaining to us again, in other terms, the French Revolution. The French Revolution, that's why I prepared a little picture here to put in there to show you in the meantime, that gave us the human rights, as they are called. Yeah, Déclaration des droits de l'homme. Yeah, so that's in French, Declaration of the Rights of Man, or human rights if you want like this. Of course, these are wonderful human rights when you see already that you have a pyramid and a sun symbol on the top, and you have Roman fasces in there, So you're going to ask yourself, what are these rights worth? Well, if you ask me as a Bible-believing Christian, I tell you they are not even worth the paper that they are printed on. Yeah? Because rights given by man to man can also be taken away by man from the man he gave it to. That's the same policy as the Pope did when he gave the crown to the kings in Europe in the time, and when the kings stopped dancing at his song, he revoked the crowns and he put them out of office. He persecuted them, he killed them, and most of the times not only the kings, but even the whole people with them. He spoke anathemas over whole nations. Yeah, there are numerous examples from Dark Ages where he did that. I don't go into that, but the problem is when you have, quote unquote, listen good, you Americans, unalienable rights. Yeah? Who gives you these rights? And the one who gives them can also take them. So when we have the Declaration of the Human Rights in 1789 with the French Revolution, which the author refers to as the hurricane here, remember that these rights are given by man and can be taken by man. God, on the other hand, in his Bible, he doesn't give us rights. He gives us ordinances, he gives us rules, he gives us commandments. Yeah? He gives us all the things that we should do and not things that we are free to have, yeah? Like human rights. I just want to make this point clear, that God, in a way, of course, used the Jesuits and the Illuminati front organization the Jesuits were hiding behind at that time to foment the French Revolution, and God used them to punish France and to punish Rome. This is what we are going to read now in the next coming few sentences, and probably in the rest of this chapter. That's what it's all about. But the point is that even God uses bad people to punish bad people, to punish people who have fallen away from his ordinances. And that's what France did. France fell away from the Bible, like Italy did too, and Germany did too. I mean, all of the quote-unquote Holy Roman Empire fell away from God's law. And that is why they were punished. And this time France was punished, and God used the Illuminati, the Jesuits, like he used in the Old Testament the Assyrians to dispose of the northern part of Israel, or he used the Babylonians to put the Jews in Babylonian captivity for 70 years. He uses these heathen to punish his people. And here again, he uses the enemy to punish the people who have fallen away from his ordinances. This is a little bit of the background story, as much as I understand it, what we are talking about here in this book. This will maybe give you a little bit more a clearer picture. But just to say that this Declaration of the Human Rights, as you can see in the picture here, is not worth the paper it is printed on, because those rights aren't given to you by the Creator God, but they are given to you by a created being, man. And the created being, man, is wicked and sinful and evil from the beginning. And what he gives cannot be something good. Only what God can give you can be something good. Like the grace he gives you, like the faith he imputes in you, yeah, and all that stuff. But okay, enough of my monologue. I have two brothers here who are eager to listen to what I have to read, and then they can participate in the reading too. But I hope that you appreciate this little introduction into the explanation what this hurricane, the French Revolution, actually brought. Now the author says this hurricane, which prostrated the throne and ultimately swept away the noblesse, reserved its fiercest blast for the clergy. The Romish Church in France was immensely powerful. Having driven out Protestantism with the sword, she reigned alone and occupied the land in the length of it and in the breadth of it. A few fugitives in the deserts of the Cevennes could no longer give her uneasiness. The Church received tithes from the annual value of 50 million sterling. Half the lands of France belonged to her. She gave ministers to the crown and barons to the communes. By far the most influential and formidable class in the kingdom was the priesthood. But the revolution fell upon them like an iron hammer. At the beginning of the movement, they had found it expedient to surrender their ties. The sacrifice was great, but it availed not to save them from still more oppressive exactions. The necessities of the state grew greater every day. The hatred of the Democrats became fiercer every hour, and the National Assembly passed a decree confiscating the whole estates of the clergy, amounting, as some compute, to more than a third and, according to the reckoning of others, to a half of the whole landed property of the kingdom. This is something that we read in Allison's History of Europe. Not content with making them pensioners of the state, the assembly next required the priests to abjure allegiance to the Pope and to take the oath to the civil constitution under pain of deprivation of their benefices and suspicion of high treason. Now, let us review the sentence a little bit. Not content with making them prisoners of the state, the assembly next required the priests to abjure allegiance to the Pope. They required the priests to abjure allegiance to the Pope and to take the oath to the civil constitution. Now, with all that we have studied in other book readings already, we know that they can take any oath they want. The oath they swore to the papacy in the first place even sets them free of the sin of treason and of perjury. So that means they can swear any oath without any consequences, without, in the eyes of the Roman Catholic Church, even to sin, because their oath to the Roman Catholic Church, their oath to their superior within the Roman Catholic Church, is always on a higher importance than any other oath. In fact, it makes any other oath a joke. So even when they were required to abjure allegiance to the Pope, they could say so, but they use mental reservation, speaking these oaths, and do whatever they want to do. You cannot trust a Roman Catholic. His first allegiance is to the Pope and to nobody else. And if you let him swear that his allegiance is not to the Pope anymore, he swears, but he uses mental reservation. Not only Jesuits do that, all Catholics do that. So that's very important that we understand that, because sometimes we think, okay, now the French Revolution was here, and look, now the people have sworn an oath, or the clergy has sworn an oath to the new government, not to pay allegiance to the Pope anymore. Now everything is good. But a few years later down the road, we come to we will be faced with the same problems again. How is that possible? Well, that's possible because their oath is not worth the air it takes breathing them to speak it out. That's the way it is. And you can believe me or you cannot believe me, I don't care. Do your own research in this regard. But that's how the Roman Catholic Church actually works. And that's why, maybe another important point to discuss one time, we know that the Jesuits have been expelled from at least 50 countries, I think 83 countries and cities during their first time of existence before they were quote-unquote banished by Dominus Ac Redemptor, the bull of the Pope Clement XIV in 1773. But how come that they always came back? Because of the mental reservation that they and every other Roman Catholic clergy took when they swore quote-unquote oath of allegiance to the then quote-unquote Jesuit or Roman Catholic free government. That's why. They are empty words. Their oaths aren't worth anything. And we read here now of the end of the 18th century, And we will see how a few years later, and you can read that in The Secret History of the Jesuits by Edmond Paris, how during the run of the 19th century the Roman Catholic Church again wins the majority of the power in France. How is that possible only 50 years later? Well, because the oaths that they take here aren't worth anything. Yeah, and you know, because Roman Catholics know that from themselves, when they let other people take oaths, for example, under the motto "convert or die," as you probably know and have heard me reading before, like for example in Hungary in the 19th century, where you have these confessions of Protestants who turned over to the Roman Catholic Church because it was convert or die, so convert to Roman Catholicism or heads be cut off, and they swore their allegiance to the Pope. Even after they sworn these, like the Serbs often did during the Second World War, you know, in the NDH, what is it called there? The state of Croatia, NDH, the Free State of Croatia, or whatever it was called. And the Serbs, to save their lives, converted to Catholicism by taking an oath. Sometimes they, or very often, even after speaking that oath and quote-unquote converting to Catholicism, they were killed. Why? Well, because the Roman Catholics knew when we use mental reservation, they do too, and what they speak is only empty words to save their life, so we're going to kill them anyway. Huh? And that's what the Roman Catholic Church has done throughout the ages, throughout the Inquisition. It's the same thing. When you, in the Inquisition, admitted to the crimes you allegedly committed, even though you didn't know what these crimes were and whatsoever, very often you were killed afterwards anyway. It doesn't matter for the Roman Catholic Church because you have a other mindset than they have, and that's the problem. And your mindset can only be really turned around when your mind is turned around, means when your head is cut off. And that's what the Roman Catholic Church loves to do. So, when you read the sentence again, not content with making them pensioners of the state, the assembly next required the priests to abjure allegiance to the Pope and to take the oath to civil constitution under pain of deprivation of their benefices and suspicion of high treason. That's right. If you don't take the oath to the civil constitution, we will take your money. Oh, don't touch the money of the Roman Catholic Church. When you touch the money of the Roman Catholic Church, she goes berserk. And you saw that in the beginning of the 16th century with Martin Luther. Because what Martin Luther did in the very first place, what was the high crime that he committed? He was teaching against indulgences. That was preaching against the money of the church. Oh, and then they get berserk. And here it's the same thing. So, the state goes against the money of the church, and then they do anything just to keep it calm, and they will do perjury, means they will take an oath and break it, because they don't care about that oath, because they are absolved from the sin of taking that oath in the first place, breaking that oath on the second place. They are already absolved by the Pope, by the hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church, for doing that. So they don't care. The cathedrals,
I think that the money of the Roman Catholic Church always is a big cause for their success, because it enables them to manipulate many people for the cause, for the sake of corruption, and I think the Roman Catholic belief is so convenient to most people because it combines not only not getting out of the comfort zone, but also to have wealth in your life, because the Roman Catholic Church also manifests as very wealthy and rich, and with many garments and precious stones and this and that we all know from the Book of Revelation, of course. But you see that
that's why. Sorry to interrupt you here, Michael.
Yeah.
But the point is, and I think that's what you're going to say also, is that the Roman Catholic Church just turns around what Jesus preached in the Gospel of Matthew when he said, don't store up your treasures here on earth where rust and moths can eat them, but store up treasures in heaven. And the Roman Catholic Church, like always, turns this 180 degrees around. They are not interested in any kind of treasure in heaven. They are only interested in worldly treasures, and that's their money.
As most people are. Jörg. So it's a very convenient belief system for most of the people. Mm-hmm. So everybody who's in the material world can get access very easily to the Roman Catholic Church, because he does not have to spend his money or whatsoever, not that much amount of. He can stay rich. He does not have to become poor or to alter his lifestyle. Not at all. Not at all. This is for the outside that the Pope Francis is doing very poorly, and I'm so polite and I drive little cars and this and that. Is on the outside. Yes, of course, but if you are a member of the Roman Catholic Church, you do not have to change your lifestyle at all. And I think that's a main part of the success of the Roman Catholic Church. They always had the money, even when they were banned or were excluded, or the Pope was shut into the Vatican unless 1929 from the Mussolini-Lateran Treaty. But they always had the money. And with the money, they could do a lot of things. And people were glad, I can serve the church, and I'm getting some kind of benefit. I will be saved at the end of my life. Yes,
and
of course.
Nowadays,
don't want to prolong that discussion.
No. But listen, nowadays, the Roman Catholic Church even can change the climate with money.
Oh, geez.
Isn't it wonderful what money all can do?
Why?
We really opened Pandora's box right there.
Why are the roads in the United States so slippery at this evening? That's very unfair.
Yeah, that's right. It's all against the people, and we'll take their money and just make it harder for them in any way we can, because it's good for us in the long run, Keep them busy.
Yeah.
Keep them so busy they can't get together and do studies on the Antichrist.
The Antichrist, you cannot study the Antichrist. He's future. You don't have to care for him anyway. He will just come in the last 7 years of the world's history.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, I forgot.
Just lean back, watch television.
Dear listener, this is sarcasm. Don't take it for granted now.
It really is sarcasm. And
Papal sarcasm. Okay.
Papal sarcasm. Oh, yeah, that's a good way to say it.
Again, let me read that sentence once again. I think it is really very profound that the sentence is well understood by the people who are studying this work. Not content with making them pensioners of the state, the assembly next required the priests to abjure allegiance to the Pope and to take the oath to the civil constitution instead of the priestly
I'm
constitution.
sorry. I've got to interrupt.
Yeah.
Can you please go back one more sentence to the necessities of the state? Grew greater every day, the hatred of Democrats.
The necessities of the state grew greater every day. The hatred of the Democrats became fiercer every hour. And the National Assembly passed a decree confiscating the whole estates of the clergy, amounting, as some compute, to more than a third, and according to the reckoning of others, to a half of the whole landed property of the kingdom. Yeah?
Oh, yeah. I was just thinking it makes so much more sense to go back one more sentence, because not content with making them pensioners of the state, the assembly next required the priest to abjure allegiance to the Pope.
And to make the priests pensioners of the state is, of course, making a church-state nation.
And that's what we have today, isn't it?
Surely in the United States of America with the 501c3, but you have that...
but tell us separation of church and state.
Well,
why would they do that?
That's how it should be,
It's how it should be, but it's not how it is.
No, it's not how it is, but listen, Brett, when you don't have a separation of church and state, you have that, what the Roman Catholic Church did through the Dark Ages.
Exactly.
She judged men on being a heretic and spoke sentences against these people, mostly, of course, death sentences, and then gave these people to the civil authorities, and they had to execute the judgments of the church.
The civil law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the civil law was obedient to the
church law, I guess.
to the church law. Yeah, exactly. So the
Good way to say
temporal law was working for the spiritual law. And that is what you have when you have a combination of church and state, and that is why church and state always should be separate.
Yeah.
If you don't have that separation, you will always have an abuse of power. And that means that the church will use her power to the utmost to press on her law, canon law, which is, let's say it like it is, satanic law. It's nothing else but satanic law. Yeah? And when church and state are together, you have no way to turn to, you as a civil person living in that country. Well, you have always Jesus Christ to turn to, but you don't turn to Jesus Christ because you don't know Jesus Christ, because you don't study your Bible, you don't read books like the Great Exodus, and you have no idea what's it all about.
Yeah,
Sorry
that's
to say,
right.
but that's
Because
it.
the Word of God has become completely neglected, and it means nothing to people because it's been corrupted.
And because the Roman Catholic Church so wonderfully presents itself as quote-unquote Christendom to this world, so nobody wants to have to do anything with Jesus Christ. If Jesus Christ is resembled in this world or presented in this world through the Roman Catholic Church, nobody wants to know Jesus Christ. I mean, that's why I didn't want to have to do anything with religion, with God, because I understood that the Roman Catholic Church was quote-unquote Christianity, which I know now it is not. But most people don't know that. They equate Christianity with Roman Catholicism. And then they see how wicked Roman Catholicism is, and they say, well, Christianity is wicked. So who do they turn to? Maitreya,
Oh, geez.
Gandhi,
Here we go.
Guru this, and so on and so on. You know? Because they are so disappointed with Christianity, because they don't even know Christianity. And that's one of the very strong points of the Roman Catholic Church. Delude the people from the knowledge who Christ is. That's what they always done. That's what they always do.
I got out of the Roman Catholic Church at the age of 24, 25 for financial reasons, and also for the reason that I could not imagine why couldn't they fight the poverty in the African states and so many children dying, this and that. At the age of 24, 25, I didn't have that access to that knowledge, of course, we have today, also without any internet and so. But you see, my explanation there was just okay. It's everything okay with God and Jesus Christ. The problem is the ground crew. Yeah. So the people which should serve God but don't serve God because they take everything. They're doing quite the opposite. In Matthew 22:21, it said. Render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. But you see that the Roman Catholic Church is so wealthy. Yeah, they could if they want to, but they don't want to change anything in this world. Yeah, they could have changed the poverty. They could have changed so many things. But what they are doing is that just about their Christmas, their Roman Catholic Saturnalia, they go around and collect money. Yeah, it's as in the old days, so nothing really has changed, and that's my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, about the point of getting out of the church, I did that in German too. You know, when I signed my contract of apprenticeship, after my first month, I got my salary, and when I got my salary, I got a paper where my salary was put in gross numbers and net numbers, and tax was deducted. and there was income tax, and then there was church tax. And I asked my father, I said, what is that? Tax for the church? I am no church. He said, well, you can opt out there, and then you save that money. Well, the very next day, I opted out. I said, I'm not going to give them any money.
So they automatically enroll everyone. Is that how it works?
Because I was baptized. I did my confirmation when I was 14 years old in the Protestant church, but of course, in that I was in that church realm. So I think everybody is supposed to be in the church anyway until you opt out. Like you're all dead zombies until you go there and say, hey, here I am and I live, and then they have to handle you in a different way. But then we go into a complete other subject now about the persons and the living man and all that. And
just one quick sentence. You know that I'm taking a dog out for a walk sometimes, and the owner of the dog is looking for another job. And she's looking for another job in the health care facility. So, for example, in the hospital. So my best friend is working in the hospital, but the problem is it's a Roman Catholic hospital.
Like most of them are, yeah.
Yeah, but the problem is that now she's not Roman Catholic. But I've asked him, and he said, "Well, okay, that's under the conditions. The only condition is you must be in the church." I said, "What's that?" Yeah, he said, okay, as the Roman Catholic Church is owning and running the hospital, it's mandatory that it's someone who is working there must be a Roman Catholic or evangelic. I said, oh, that's interesting. So you see you see that maybe since 1999 they all allow so-called Protestants.
Yeah, the ecumenical evangelibellies, as Tom
would
call them.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Okay, that's my contribution for now.
Okay, we are not doing much reading, but I love this discussion that we are having here. But let's make sure again that I'm going to read that sentence. I just can't get enough of this. It says not content with making them pensioners of the state, meaning combining church and state. The assembly next required the priests to abjure allegiance to the Pope and to take the oath to the civil constitution under pain of deprivation of their benefices and suspicion of high treason. The cathedrals and chapters were suppressed. All the monastic houses in the kingdom, to the number of 4,000, were abolished. The number of bishops was reduced, and an end put to their feudal prerogatives. These proceedings were crowned by the decree of 1793, which abolished the Church and proscribed Christianity itself. For 3 years and a half, France worshipped no God. 3.5 years. For 3.5 years had all open profession of the truth been suppressed in papal Europe at a former period, and the dead bodies of the witnesses had lain on the street of the great city. For 3 years and a half, atheism reigned in France, and atheism gives you these human rights, understand this correctly. This Déclaration des droits de l'homme is from the New Age movement. That is from that movement that we read about here. Where was I?
For 3.5.
For 3.5 years, atheism reigned in France, and this atheism gave you the Declaration of the Human Rights, and all kinds of indignities were inflicted upon the professors of Romanism. Many churches were razed. Such as were left standing were converted into barns, stables, or factories. The gold and silver vessels of the altar were coined into money. The bells of the steeples were cast into cannon. 24,000 priests perished by massacre or by the guillotine. Many fled from the kingdom and others lived in concealment, the peasantry in some instances sheltering and in others betraying them. Only some of these men had personally shared in the persecutions of former years, yet upon this generation came all the righteous bloodshed in France since the beginning of the Reformation. Though this devastating tempest had its first outbreak in France, it was not confined to that country alone. The soldiers of the Republic carried the principles and the tragedies of the Revolution to other lands. In Spain, which is the most Catholic country ever to exist on this earth, in Portugal, probably just only second to Spain in Catholicity, in Italy, in Austria, in short, in every popish state in Europe, the same scenes of mingled horror and retribution were enacted. The ecclesiastical lands were confiscated, cathedrals and abbeys were plundered, and their hoards thrown into the military chest. Their bells, cups, and votive offerings were melted down. The churches were turned into stables, and convents and refectories into barracks. The images and pictures were defaced and broken. The rites of the Popish Church were turned into mockery. The Inquisition was raised. The monastic orders were suppressed, and the ecclesiastics were maltreated, banished, or massacred on the same instruments of torture on which the confessors of Jesus had been stretched. Means they used their own weapons against them. From these humiliations and calamities the Pope himself had no exemption. He was seized in his palace, carried prisoner, and died in exile. This is what the SDA loves to teach so much. 1798, General Berthier going into Rome, make prisoner of the Pope, put him into exile, and there from the shock a few years later he dies. Yeah? So, thus raged the hurricane, speaking still of the French Revolution. Terror marched before it. Behind it was the blackness of desolation. Thrones prostrated, altars broken, hearts desolated, manhood slaughtered, noble cities given to the flames. Virtue trampled down like the mire in the streets. The earth bearing on her bosom gory heaps instead of golden harvests. The vine drinking blood instead of the crystal rivulet that was wont to water it. The hearts of the mighty melting, their knees smiting on against another, and the whole power, glory, and pride of the papal earth spoiled and laid waste. This day of wrath covered all Europe. As a destruction from the Lord of hosts, so did it come upon the papal nations. And that is a confirmation of my leading sense in the beginning of the reading. As you remember that I said that God even uses the Jesuits, the Illuminati, the enemies, to take his revenge on the people. As a destruction from the Lord of hosts, so did it come upon the papal nations. The revolution rose out of the past. It was no momentary ripple. This mountainous wave breaking on the shore of the 18th century had begun to gather as early as the 5th century. The extravagancy of the 14th and 15th Louis, meaning these French kings, where Louis XIV is the quote-unquote son king, as you remember probably, and the enormous deficit thereby created was the cause, say some, that generated the revolution. It were just as wise to affirm that the great Atlantic may be convulsed into storm by the casting of a pebble into its waves. Society was revolutionized, not because it had been burdened, but because it had been corrupted. This is a very interesting sentence. Society was revolutionized not because it had been burdened, but because it had been corrupted. Aren't we living in the same kind of day today? Yeah? That everyone is waiting for a revolution to throw these people from their leading places in all kinds of corrupt governments that we are leaving. We are burdened with them because we are all being corrupted. We are all being corrupted by the Roman Catholic Church. We are all being corrupted by the Antichrist. Yeah? I think that is a little bit quite similar to the times that we live in today. What did you want to say, Michael?
Yeah, that's what I mentioned before, the corruption. Huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
See that for the love of money is the root of all evil, and that also goes for every state or church or every organization. If it becomes too big, it becomes corrupt.
Yeah, there's this saying, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Yeah?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, this was no financial crisis. It was an outburst of hellish passions. Whence came these passions, and what engendered them? The whole history of the revolution may be written in a single sentence. The Church was the foster mother of the atheism of the 18th century, and that atheism produced the revolution of 1792. By a natural law, as inevitable as it is wholesome, the noxious vapors that corrupt the air bring in the tempest that purifies it. By a moral law, equally inevitable and salutary, superstition engenders scepticism, and scepticism brings in the social tornado that sweeps away the superstition. The physical tempest comes from God. From God, too, comes the moral hurricane. In the chariot of the whirlwind he descends to purify the earth and save it from the universal death which error, it left to grow and spread unchecked, would inevitably inflict. The first pioneers, then, of this terrible revolution were the priests of Rome, who revolted the intellect by their dogmas and outraged the conscience by their scandalous lives. No sooner have we believed in Christ, said Duclos, no sooner have we believed in Christ than we are asked to believe in the baptism of bells. Next came Voltaire and Rousseau, and both, by the way, Jesuits. The priests had taught for Christianity mere fable, and now Voltaire and Rousseau taught that Christianity was nothing more than fable. In proof, they pointed to what passed as Christianity in Catholic Europe. Now, then I have to say, reading this sentence again, we need a Rousseau and we need a Voltaire today to point out to all the world that Christianity is being hiding after the mask of Catholic Europe, of Catholicism. In proof, they pointed to what passed as Christianity in Catholic Europe. That means they took the mask of the Roman Catholic Church and said, this is not Christianity. And they did it with other means and other purposes than the Reformation did, but they did it. They exposed the Roman Catholic Church for not being Christianity, and this is someone who we really could count on, or would need to count on these days. Yeah? We need again people, as I read to you in the book All Roads Lead to Rome from Michael the Semnian, who stand on the rooftops and shout it from the rooftops that the papacy is the Antichrist and that Roman Catholicism is in no way, shape or form Christianity. Has nothing to do with the Jesus Christ of the Bible, has nothing to do with Jehovah, Yahuwah, our Creator God, our Father in heaven. Nothing whatsoever. If anything good came out of the French Revolution, it is that Voltaire and Rousseau taught that Christianity is not what people think it is in Catholicism. Well, here I really have to say I admire what Voltaire and Rousseau in that way did. If they took the mask from the Roman Catholic Church in that way to open the eyes of the people and show to them this is not Christianity, yeah, But the problem is they were teaching atheism. And they were not putting Christianity, real biblical Christianity, in the place of Roman Catholicism. And that's the problem why I'm not so in favor of people like Rousseau and Voltaire. As I told you, they were Jesuit trained, so they were ultimately working for their master. And that means that they will maybe show what the Roman Catholic Church really is all about, but they will not tell you what real Christianity is all about. They will say Roman Catholicism is not Christianity, but they won't tell you what Christianity is. They will leave you deluded. They will leave you dazzled, that you don't know where to turn to anymore. And then you turn to what Voltaire and Rousseau actually teach, and that is New Age. In proof, they pointed to what passed as Christianity in Catholic Europe, and which, although ministering at the altar and upheld by princely revenues, was demonstrably a palpable fable, a gross and impudent imposture. Next in the ranks of those who paved the way for the revolution came the encyclopedists. These lights of France placed all intelligence in matter, and taught that death is an eternal sleep. Around the encyclopedia clustered a number of kindred societies, who adopted as their more distinguishing tenets that all the sufferings of society grew out of the inequality of rank and the unequal division of property. If so, was not the cure very obvious? If bad opinions were but so many bad pieces of matter, would not the cutting off of so many heads a day exterminate these opinions? What harm would be done? The men who held these opinions would sleep their eternal sleep, and society, thus purged, would return to its primeval purity. The revolution had now reached a stage where it must necessarily pass into a great social experiment. Danton and Robespierre stood up, prepared with the dread machinery of revolutionary tribunals and the guillotine, to make the revolution no longer a principle but a fact. And by the way, the guillotine was invented by Mr. Guillotine, who was yes, you guessed right, a Jesuit. The revolution stood embodied before the eyes of France. The beautiful theory of Rousseau was now translated into the guillotine of Robespierre. Those who had worshipped the goddess when veiled in the glittering robes which Voltaire had woven for her, started back with horror when they saw the hideousness of her naked features. "Liberty," said one, "Liberty slept on a mattress of corpses." She demanded all France as a hecatomb. She demanded all France as a hecatomb. France had to learn that, as in physics, so in morals, the stream cannot rise higher than the fountain. Means the water cannot go above its source. Commencing with theory that annihilates all virtue, France hoped to rise to happiness. Alas! She precipitated herself into an abyss of misery. She borrowed the ladder of hell to scale heaven and fell backwards into pandemonium. The sayings of some of the actors in these scenes had a prophetic truth, of which those who uttered them were altogether unconscious. One instance of this we have already adduced in the Bishop of Toulouse, who foretold that the last blows which the Bourbon should ever inflict on heresy were drawing nigh, little dreaming that even then the scaffold was preparing for the King of France. Still more striking was the text of the sermon preached by the Abbé Fauchet in Notre Dame, on occasion of blessing the colors of the National Guard. The Abbé selected that sublime passage of Isaiah in which the prophet predicts the bringing as an offering to God of his long persecuted people in the latter day. Quote, In that time shall the present be brought unto the Lord of hosts of a people scattered and peeled, and from a people terrible from their beginning hitherto, a nation meted out and trodden underfoot, whose land the rivers have spoiled, to the place of the name of the Lord of hosts in the Mount Zion. This is taken from Isaiah chapter 18, verse 7. The words of the prophet, speaking of Isaiah of course, the preacher affirmed, shadowed forth the revolution. But he disfigured and travestied the prophecy by applying it to France. Quote, For a long time, so he said, France had waited for justice. For a long time she had been trodden underfoot. But, free at last, she came, first of all, to consecrate to the Lord of hosts the banners under which her children had fought. Alas, France had driven away liberty. That's why they gave the Statue of Liberty to the United States of America. For 3 centuries she had pursued it with edicts and stakes. The people now to be brought as a present to the Lord of hosts were the people whom France had for ages persecuted. But they were to be brought in a chariot of fire and by a path of blood. Of this the unconscious prophecy was now uttered beneath the roof of Notre Dame. It said, The year of my redeemed is come. In fine, the unmistakable likeness of the past, so vividly stamped upon all the horrors of the Revolution, marks it out as an era of retribution. All its tragedies were resurrections. They rose from the prisons and graves of the martyrs like so many nemesis. Where did the revolutionists find their models? Was it not in the annals of persecution? They searched the massacre of St. Bartholomew that they might reenact it in all its horrors upon the sons of the men who had first contrived it. The drums beat upon the scaffold, the wholesale drownings, the edicts of proscription were all faithful copies of those which had been framed for the extermination of the Huguenots. While we profoundly commiserate the unhappy men on whom these sufferings fell, it becomes us, nevertheless, to mark the justice of God and the fulfillment of His word. Quote, Reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her, double according to her works. In the cup which she hath filled, fill to her double. Unquote. The very spot where the Revolution committed its atrocities was fitted, in instances not a few, to recall the remembrance of past sins. On the Place de Grève was the first martyr of the Reformation burned. Place de Grève, that is a place of grievance, I think it is. On the Place de Grève did the first victim of the Revolution perish. The closing scenes of persecution were brought on by the revocation of the Edict of Nantes, and in the neighborhood of Nantes were enacted some of the most frightful butcheries of the Revolution. Payback, eh? The Noyades of Nantes have a melancholy celebrity. We give as an example a short extract from Allison. Quote, No less than 18,000 perished in these ways, or by the guillotine in Nantes alone, during the administration of Carrier. And the mariners, when they heaved their anchors, frequently brought up boats charged with corpses. Birds of prey flocked to the shores and fed on human flesh, while the very fish became so poisonous as to induce an order of the municipality of Nantes prohibiting them to be taken by the fishermen. From Saumur to Nantes, a distance of 60 miles, the Loire was for several weeks red with human blood. The incendiary stream far at sea divided the blue waves of the deep. The multitude of corpses it bore to the ocean was so prodigious that the adjacent coast was strewed with them, and a violent west wind in high tide having brought part of them back to Nantes, followed by a train of sharks and marine animals of prey, attracted by so prodigious an accumulation of human bodies, they were thrown ashore in vast numbers. 15,000 persons perished there under the hands of the executioner, or of diseases in prison, in 1 month. The total victims of the Reign of Terror at that place exceeded 30,000 altogether. Yeah, this is quite a lot that we are reading about the French Revolution so far. And I don't know how many pages do we still have until the end of this chapter.
We got 6 more pages.
Well, then we can try maybe to finish this today. And we can start next time afresh with a new chapter. Had this tempest assailed France from without, she could have opposed a barrier to it. But what could human power avail against the vengeance that descended upon her from the skies? Though the bars of her gates had been of adamant, could they have kept out the judgments of God? Though her bulwarks had climbed to heaven, and her towers had mounted to the sky, could they have repelled the bolts of the Omnipotent? Though her armies had been multiplied as the sand of the sea, could they have withstood the chariots of the Most High? There was no earthly foe which the France of that age would not have dared to meet. But he who now summoned her to a reckoning was the God of the Huguenots. He looked forth in this morning watch upon France through the pillar of fire and of the cloud, and troubled her. He also bowed the heavens and came down, and there was darkness under his feet. He rode upon a cherub and did fly, and he soared on the wings of the wind. He made darkness his covert round about him, his pavilion volumes of waters, thick clouds of the skies. At the brightness before him thick clouds dissolved into hailstones and flashes of fire, and Jehovah thundered in the heavens. And the Most High sent forth his voice, even hailstones and flashes of fire. He also sent forth his arrows and scattered them, showers of lightnings and confounded them. Then the channels of the waters disappeared, then the foundations of the world were discovered. At thy rebuke, O Jehovah. And this is taken from a new translation of the book of Psalms by Benjamin Weiss. So again, we have this other quote-unquote Bible that James Atkin Wylie here turns to, which I still find a shame, because I much more appreciate when the writings are coming from the King James Bible. And I know that my two brothers with me agree, and I hope that you in front of the screen also agree on that we should always turn to an uncorrupted Bible as the King James Version, the true and undefiled Word of God as it is preserved still today in 2020 for us. Now in their march through the great desert, 4,000 years ago, the Israelitish tribes hauled beneath the granite precipice of Horeb. Precipices of Horeb. Their prophet
precipice,
leader,
actually, precipice.
Precipice, yeah. I knew I just didn't have the right pronunciation there.
Yeah,
I know the
close.
word, but when you read it, then sometimes it looks different and you want to pronounce it a different way.
Yes, it
Precipice.
does.
Yeah. In their march through the great desert 4,000 years ago, the Israelitish tribes hauled beneath the granite precipice of Horeb. Their prophet leader, speaking of Moses, climbs the hill, and in that cave's mouth, high in air, he stands with face bowed down to the earth. A cloud descends on the mountain, an awful presence passes by, and a voice proclaims these four great truths, cardinal attributes, all of them, in the character of the Supreme: long-suffering, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, keeping mercy to thousands, that will by no means clear the guilty. This is again a rape. I don't have any other word. A rape of the 1611 King James Bible. Yeah, God is long-suffering, but he will visit the iniquities of the fathers until the third and the fourth generation of them that hate me, and will show mercy to the thousands that love him and keep his commandments. Yeah, that's the way it should read. That is taken from the fourth, from the second commandment about images and idols. Okay.
Exodus 20, right? Yeah.
Exodus 20, yeah. The second commandment is that.
Yeah.
Here is the statute book of the great ruler opened. These are 4 pillars that support the throne on which sits the great judge, dispensing justice to the nations. This is the key to all history since. Read aright, the long drama on the history of Europe is just the proclamation of those 4 great principles first announced amid the solitudes of Horeb. Long-suffering, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children until the third and fourth generation, keeping mercy to thousands that love me and keep my commandments, that will by no means clear the guilty. Long-suffering, what does that stand for? For upwards of 1200 years did God wait for the papal nations. Silent throughout the long centuries sat the great judge in the heavens. Power waxed fat, climbed up to the thrones, and reveled in oppression. Truth was overborne and trampled down, and had to flee to the dens and caves of the earth. But the period of waiting came at length to an end, and then the European nations were assisted at the bar of the great judge. Visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children. How few of the men on whom the storm of 1792 burst had any personal share in the persecution of the Protestants. The scaffolds, noyades, and bloody battlefields of the Revolution were the punishment of crimes which had been committed ages before. The perpetrators of these crimes went to sleep in marble, leaving it to their sons to expiate their tyrannies and hypocrisies under the axe of the guillotine. Thus, before our very eyes, is God visiting on the sons the iniquities of the fathers. Yet, in this the judge of all of the earth does right, for these sons, by a continuance in their fathers' idolatries, have served themselves heirs to the father's sins. Keeping mercy to thousands. The visible distinction betwixt Protestant and Popish nations since the outbreak of the French Revolution, and especially the proud career of Britain, which has grown out of the happy choice made at the Reformation, sufficiently illustrate this principle. The future, in all probability, is destined to yield still larger and more magnificent illustrations of it. Well, yeah, show me a little bit of that today, because there's no reformational country left anymore. And even in the writing of this book by James Atkin Wylie, the working of the Oxford movement was to be felt in England. Yeah? And England became Roman Catholic at the end of the 19th century, and James Atkin Wylie knows this. I mean, that's why he wrote against it. That's why he wrote books like Rome and Civil Liberty and books like these. Anyway, that will by no means clear the guilty. How inflexible is the divine justice, all the papal nations have had ample opportunity of testing since the era of the Reformation. Not one of them has been able to recall the choice it then made, or to avert the terrible consequences of that choice. But the guiltiest of them all is France. France sinned against greater light than Italy, or Spain, or Austria. She was at the very gates of Protestantism. She may be said to have entered in when the apostasy of Henry IV turned her back and placed her irrevocably on the side of Rome. She has sealed her apostasy by persecutions more cruel and bloody than those of any other papal power. Now let's just go into this little footnote here about Henry IV, I think it is. Clement VII, so that's Antichrist Clement VII, lost England, observed Serafino one day, by excommunicating Henry VIII. Clement VIII saved France by absolving Henry IV. Yeah? If I remember correctly, Henry IV was the one who gave France the Edict of Nantes in 1595, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere about that time. The pontiff himself fully comprehended the gravity of the crisis. "My brethren," said Antichrist Clement VIII to the consistory assembled in the Quirinal on August 2nd, 1595, how right I am sometimes with the years, didn't read that, to deliberate on the petition of Henry IV, praying to be received into communion with the Church of Rome. "My brethren, your verdict will decide the fate of the realm of France rather than the private case of the king who has submitted to the Church." Unquote. Henry IV and Marie de Medici. Yeah, he was married to a Medici woman. But still, he was the one who put out the Edict of Nantes, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. She has sealed her apostasy by persecutions, the author continues to say, more cruel and bloody than those of any other papal power. On France, therefore, first of all, did vengeance fall, and through France, as the door, did vengeance overtake the rest. The liberty France parted with when she forsook the Reformation, prayers, tears, and blood have been ineffectual to buy back, and so of all the papal nations. Ever as they lift up their heads and promise to themselves an era of liberty and prosperity, there comes another stroke that lays them prostrate in the dust. He will by no means clear the guilty. Of this truth, and with special reference to this epoch, what a striking scenic representation has our Lord given in the 25th chapter of Matthew. This, his closing parable, presents two pictures. In the remote background of the vision is seen the Last Judgment, but in the foreground is placed the judgment of papal and Protestant nations at the close of the 7 times. The parable follows that of the 10 virgins, in which our Lord foreshows his sudden coming at midnight, when, as we have already shown, the darkness of a semi-infidelity covered the whole of Christendom. Faith was not on the earth, and the Protestant, equally with the Popish churches, were sleeping a deep sleep. That is a prediction of today in 2020, right? The Protestant, equally with the Popish churches, were sleeping a deep sleep. Oh yeah, that's 2020 to me. The 5 Protestant churches, Scotland, England, Geneva, Prussia, Holland, arose and trimmed their lamps in the way of reforms within and evangelistic enterprises without. The 5 Popish churches, France, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Austria, found that they could not trim theirs, for with them the truth was totally lost. The former, accordingly, enter with the bridegroom into the marriage, the latter are shut out in outer darkness. At this point, the form of the vision changes, and the scene becomes judicial and solemn. When the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory. Now let us mark that it is the coming of the Son of Man, of which Christ here speaks, with evident reference to Daniel's prophecy. It is nations he summons to his tribunal. It is nations he separates and places on the right and on the left, and that separation turns on the treatment these nations had respectively given to the Reformation. They who had welcomed it when it came as a stranger to their shores, who had given asylum and bread to its poor persecuted followers, and had not been ashamed to own it in prison, passed to the right. They who had thrown it into prison are ranged to the left. We hear France begin to say, Lord, when we saw thee an hungered, as the thirst, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not minister unto thee? When shall the king answer and say unto them, when ye drove Huguenots in hunger, and thirst, and nakedness, and crowds from your kingdom, ye did it unto me. When ye made France swim with blood of Bartholomew Eve, ye did it unto me. When ye filled your prisons with victims and crowded your scaffolds with martyrs, I lay in prison. I stood on the scaffold. Inasmuch as ye did it unto the least of these my brethren, ye did it unto me. Now, that is a very profound ending of this reading, I think. And I will very much love to hear my two brethren giving some last comments on what I just read, so that next time we can start afresh with a new chapter. I know the reading has been a little bit more about an hour, but it was very interesting what we discussed in the beginning, and it was even more interesting what you read at the end. And as I said, it is not an easy book. It is maybe interesting for you to study it a little bit more and to read it for yourself another time, even without me reading it. Read it for yourselves and embrace the words that James Atkin Wylie writes here in the midst of the 19th century to give you a wonderful explanation of the 10 virgins, which we just stopped with. That's the conclusion that I want to stop with today. Read it for yourself, and of course read your Bible. And now I will turn to my two brethren for closing comments.
Yeah, you see, it's very tough sometimes if you realize that all of the prominent people who are being taught in the school actually are connected to the Jesuit order. It's so twisted that everything we seem to be as usually as normal actually are the people who are being held as some kind of actors in a big role play. And after all, God's in control. I know that, but you see that the problem is that 98% or whatsoever of the people don't know that. And people think that the players which are visible are the actual powers in charge, and they aren't. And so if you speak about the French Revolution or the history which followed after that, with all the papal, where all the papacy seemed to have lost power, and so it was all a plan, long planned before, and it's so hard because you see that that's the same as Kennedy or whoever talk, that this deception, this real conspiracy is so big that people do not believe you if you point it out. I got always the problem that people think I'm nuts. They don't have any kind of contribution to the discussion, but they simply think that I am nuts because I'm speaking about things they haven't been heard in their life. And so, how to spread the word? Then to make these readings, because you see that these books are hardly available, and you can only spread the word by having a lecture for the people who would never come across these books, by having access, of course, to BitChute or archive.org. But if we or Brett or whoever wouldn't have come across that book, we wouldn't have not read the book, and we could not point out the facts which are being stated in the book. And so I'm very glad for everyone who comes across books, for example, from archive.org, because it's such a treasure at the moment, I think, at this small moment of time. small time window. It's such a pressure. If you look upon at archive.org, what kind of stuff is there, and nobody seems to care. And I hope it will be a long time open so that we can look upon other books to have simply a cross-reference to measure it, because also this book of the Great Exodus is written by a man and not inspired from the Holy Word of God. And so I think we have to measure everything and have to make cross-references to other things. But you see, so much information here, so much information in 1 hour, that a high part of France belonging to the papacy, and the papacy is so filthy rich. It's always contradiction against the Bible. It's everywhere the opposite. It's the other way around. And so if you take care that people do not get the Bible, do not get the meaning of the Bible, and have no access to the Bible, they can play their role perfectly. But in that case, that people read the Bible and have a Bible and can then compare it, then they are very much on the downside. But you see, I think it will lead to that the people who wanted to know the truth have to read the Bible. We are reading here men's books, which can be some kind of twisted or some kind of sometimes not right. And it's also the same thing here with the Great Exodus, where we discovered he's not quoting from the King James Bible. It's a scheme, which I know also from the Code for Babylon, because P.D. Stewart also did not use the King James Bible 1611. And so I think in the end, it all comes down to the quote of Jörg, where he tells the people to read the Bible, because then you got the foundation of all. And all these little books, which we or you or whoever has discovered, are very precious little things. But in the end, it comes down to the nitty-gritty at all, and this is the King James Bible 1611, and therefore I hand it over to our host, Brett.
Thanks, Michael. Thank you, Jörg. Yes, an incredible session today on the closing of this chapter. And yes, I found it rather profound when we read that page here. I think it's page 296 that talks about the semi-infidelity covered the whole of Christendom, faithless not found on the earth. And the Protestant, equally with the Popish churches, were sleeping a deep sleep, and certainly that is going on today. It continues. This little chapter here at the end, actually it's a rather big chapter, is something to think about. I think that it's a little bit too much to comment on right now, but certainly is getting late in the session. I think we're going to close it up, and we're looking forward to the next part of the book we're coming to, and that's page 297, chapter 6, the opening of the temple to the nations. Gee, this book just seems to get more and more interesting as time goes on. So hope to see you, all of you, next time. Please feel free to leave comments, and hope everything is going well. Catch up with you then. Bye-bye.